What is up, guys? Welcome to the Hearthstone China Summer Championship. This is the Blizzcon Qualifier for China. The second representative is going to come out of this tournament. We are down to our final two players. This is the finals. It is between Zhongbo of Team Tongfu versus E-Stars Jason Zhou, two of the best players in China, and we'll tell you why in just a few moments, but we're going to go ahead and take a look at them on screen right here as we take a look at them shaking hands. But just to start off with, L0rinda, what can you tell us about, just a little nugget about both of these players?
So Zhongbo has come from not from nowhere, but he's basically forced his way into the equation for these events by winning qualifiers and just getting through the hard way uninvited. He's been invited to this one because he's done so much work early in the year. Jason Zhou, decent name in America, in the American server before moving back to China. Already got a name for himself, so was a bit more easily invited, I guess. But both terrific players. I remember asking you off stream a month or two ago who you thought the best player in China was, and you said, honestly, I think it might be Zhongbo. Now, things may have changed since then, but he is right up there, as is Jason Zhou. It's actually the dream final for us, I think, casting.
Right, the reason why I said honestly is because he only had the Gold Series win
Right.
and the Gold Series Grand Finals win to his name, which is very impressive, but it's just two tournaments need some sort of consistency.
Right.
Someone like Tice comes to mind where it's just overwhelming consistency, like so many tournaments back to back to back. But having seen, the established players in China play and having seen this guy play and seeing very, very, very few mistakes from him, it's, I just had to go with him as one of the best players in China as we take a look at those statistics here. 64.6% going first, 68.4% going second. Obviously, if you made it to the finals, then you're going to have good percentages there, so no surprise. By the way, before you take a look at Jason Zhou, the reason why I was chuckling a bit to myself earlier was I can't get enough of Tiddler Celestial being there on the casting desk with his amazing attire, the punk shirt, and it literally says punk on the shirt in massive letters, and his stylish hats as always. He was casting with Snowkiss and Valera of Team Tongfu, so he's actually casting his own player here. And Jason Zhou, similarly very outstanding percentages, 64% going first, 60% going second. And L0rinda, we were talking about this before, even during the third place match, that 6-0 for Jason Zhou's Paladin, and meanwhile, just today and yesterday, we've seen Zhongbo go 6-0 against Paladin.
Right, so that's going to be the talking point, of course, when the Paladin comes out. Be interesting to see if it does something strange happens. I can't see that you'd ever ban that. Sometimes it bans itself, just by being a slightly inconsistent deck. But be interesting to see exactly what happens when that does get played. Just want to put up as well when you say about Zhongbo makes very few mistakes. That's entirely true. But also occasionally he does unique ways of thinking. He'll do something that looks awful, and then you think about it for a second, you're like, oh, he's doing it for this reason. He's one of those players, and there are very few players who really catch you by surprise with a play that makes you think, oh my goodness, that's actually amazing. Or even if it's not amazing, it's like, yep, that's valid. He's doing it a totally different way. And yeah, he's a player that sometimes comes up with very interesting plays, and definitely one of the quality guys. The reason I've talked about him so much, Jason Zhou, a bit more of a known quantity in the West. He had a run in last year's World Championship, sort of top 32, something like that in LA. Nothing particularly deep, I don't think, but he had some high legend finishes to set that up, and did. He was a player that was in those championship events, I think.
And we have the Chinese fans voting against Jason Zhou once again. What can we get? What can we do to get Jason Zhou the fan vote here? I'm not really sure. Taking a look at these bans, and no surprise, both Warriors banned. It's been consistent up until this point. Just ban those Warriors out if you can. Jason Zhou, he went against the grain last match, banning out the Mage because he didn't want to deal with that freeze Mage, and it was one of the ways that X-Hope was able to get to this point so far, so certainly an intelligent ban there by Jason Zhou. And he was rewarded when he saw the standard Tempo Warrior rather than the Dragon variant. But in this case, going to be no Warriors in this final.
Right, and he didn't look comfortable against the Warrior when he did play it. I think this used to happen with Patron Warrior when everyone banned that. If you ban a class too many times, you kind of stop practicing against it because you don't feel that you need to. So maybe he was a little bit rusty with all the Warrior bans that are going on. That was the only game where he looked even slightly uncomfortable in the semi-final.
Yeah, and talking about Jason Zhou a bit, you talked about Zhongbo earlier. He's the Gold Series Grand Finals winner. He got third place in the Spring Championship, which was the BlizzCon qualifier that Breath was able to qualify through. So he's gotten very close, and this is the closest yet he's going to be able to go to BlizzCon potentially. But on the side of Jason Zhou, again, like you mentioned, he participated in the America's Winter Preliminaries, but then moved back to China, had a very outstanding record in the Hearthstone Team Story, China's premier team league. He went from Vici Gaming, now on E-Star Gaming, and he actually got the top 8 of the Shanghai Gold Series event as well, consistently performing extremely well. And if you guys are aware of him, you're probably aware of him because he used to, queue into some of the top players on the ladder, because he, again, was one of the top players on the ladder as well in the Western scene. Getting this first match of this best of 7 series, it's going to be the Aggro Shaman here from Zhongbo versus the Token Druid here from Jason Zhou. A very even matchup indeed, but Jason Zhou lacking that ramp, at least as of now.
And that Doomhammer is really important for the Aggro Shaman in this matchup. Not necessarily in your opening hand, obviously, but the Druid has very few ways to stop it if it comes down on curve. It can do a lot of damage before those Ancients of Wars, etc., start kicking in. And it doesn't need to do a lot of damage, it just needs to do some. So really good looking start here for Zhongbo, and as you say, no help here for Jason Zhou at all, apart from that Wrath will buy him a turn maybe.
Yep, had to go for that just to make sure that he doesn't fall too far behind, but this is the counter to the Wrath. You just play out that Totem Golem and make your opponent deal with it. Jason Zhou sitting here with his Power of the Wild, doesn't really want to do it, but he kind of just has to, and trade 2 for 1, unfortunately, with this Totem Golem, potentially. And
right, not only... Yeah.
I'm going to just face tank it. All right. This is the problem with Druid, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you get those amazing ramp hands, and you just get ahead of your opponent, but sometimes this happens. And when this does happen, it starts to become a runaway win for the Shaman.
Right, and this is an important Finley. Every card's important in this game, but this is an important Finley. If he gets a good roll here, and there's a lot of them, and that's not them.
Yeah, looks like Paladin, sadly enough.
Wow. Whenever you have to take Paladin off a Finley, you know that you've rolled really low.
Yeah, it's going to have to be done. You don't want to pick Rogue here. It can provide you some tempo, but I imagine you're playing the Argent Horse Rider every single time next turn. And after that, you have 2 draws to pick up something to do, and you already have the Rock Fighters potentially to use those. So yeah, you can just pick up that Paladin and go out and making some dudes.
Right, things starting to look bad, except for the fact there's this burst of Doomhammer double Rockbiter, which is so much damage. So, that's a 16 damage waiting to happen at some point on turn 6. And that's pretty awkward to deal with the hand that Jason Zhou's got at the moment.
This is the problem with Myra Keeper. If you don't innervate it out, suddenly you're playing a 3-3 on turn 4, and you kind of have to play the 3-3 on turn 4 because of how clunky Jason Zhou's hand is. Just spelling more trouble here. Zhongbo goes for the Hero Power plus the Argent Squire. Very weak against Swipe, but even if there is a Swipe, he can start smacking the face here.
Right, and very patient there not to play the Feral Spirits, because he could be thinking, oh, this Doomhammer is just going to win me the game, but he knows that any Ancient of War, that's that plan gone. So he needs to go for a slightly longer term plan. And yeah, just keeping things back and making his 1/1s.
Jason Zhou just taking as much damage off the board as possible. He could have taken 2 damage a different way, but would have gotten some good trades for his opponent. So goes ahead and does this. It also makes it so that the Finley can't trade very well with the 1/1s. So smart trades here from Jason Zhou. Just wants to get to that Ancient of War as quickly as possible. One other option is to pick up Innervate off the top, potentially go for that Cenarius. And waiting in the wings is Yogg, potentially, if he can get his spells out.
Right, and I think Zhongbo's just going for the throat here. He knows, obviously, with his double Rockbiter, this is a lethal setup, and he's probably got the wind of the fact that Jason Zhou's hand is pretty awkward. He might be expecting the Ancient, but we've seen time and time again, one of Zhongbo's favourite things to do is ask the question, have you got it? And, so often the answer is, nope, I haven't got it. And that's going to be game number 1, unless we're missing something incredibly obvious here.
Yeah, no, there's no taunt, there's no heal, so that is going to be game here for Zhongbo. Jason Zhou thinking what is the best way to play out this turn. He's going to go through the motions, but yeah, this is definitely going to be game here for Zhongbo. I want to go back to what you just mentioned, L0rinda, as far as, taking chances and hoping your opponent doesn't have it. It's kind of like playing poker, right? And this is referred to as wizard poker sometimes. But
sure.
It's something that's you know, in poker, a lot of times you have to take risks, and if your opponent has it, your opponent has it. But you have to take risks sometimes, and you play the percentages. And if you're putting yourself in a position to win, 60% of the time, then over the long run, you're going to win. And in a game like Hearthstone, it can be painful, especially in championships like this, to go for the odds-on play. But in the end, it will work out for you.
Yeah, and it's worked out really nicely for him. And Zhongmo's played 5 games of Hearthstone today, and he's won them all in what I want to say is about half an hour total.
He's trying to make
He's
things
just
easy for
murdered
us.
everybody.
He's trying to make things easier for us, right? I mean, we had to cast the full 7 games in that third place match, and John Bo's like, "Don't worry, Lorinda. Don't worry, D2. I got this. It's gonna be a nice, easy 4-0 for me as well." And Jason Joe's gonna try to stop that. If anyone can stop that, it's him. But he's falling behind 1-0 in his best of 7 so far.
Quite an important one to win there as well. We talk about sometimes not all points are equal in best of 7s when it comes to conquest. That one being, a 50-50 match means it's more important than, say, you may queue a match that you're expecting to lose anyway, being slightly less important. They're all important, but that one was a big one, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Shaman is one that can really fall into trouble. We saw Jason Joe having issues with his Druid earlier, but not for the reasons in this match. Before, he didn't draw his big minions. He just after drawing all of his ramp, and this time he didn't have the ramp to go into the big minions in the first place. Falls behind in this, and yeah, again, any of these decks, since they're all so refined, so well tuned, it's if one of them falls, it can fall into trouble.
Right, definitely good to get stuff out of the way. Like you say, everything's so refined now, and we're going to have the Druid versus the Zoo, which is yet another tight match, probably favoured. Well, we've said this every time. Has Zoo won one yet? We keep saying it's slightly favoured for the Zoo. And
Zoo won when it got Onyxia off the mulch, and Jason Joe couldn't pick up any cards whatsoever to his name. So, yeah, it's that said, though, I think that Druid has had the ramp every single time, and this time the Druid doesn't have the ramp, which is strange because I feel like we've seen ramp for Druid every single time. What is going on with these players? I thought they were good at Druid, If you're good at Druid,
yeah, they're just making the players work for their wins with Druid, and that's not what Druid likes to do. Druid just likes to cheat and win that way. So making them have to think with the draws they're getting, very unfair of the Hearthstone server to do this to them.
Yeah, and this is the reason why we feel like, or some people certainly feel like the Zoo is the default favorite, because things like this can happen. Jumbo has nothing to do right here, and Jason Joe curves out 1 into 1 into 2 into very, very powerful 3 here.
Yep, and this is what Zoo does. This isn't a exceptional draw. This is just a Zoo draw that's not bad. And yeah, like you say, the Druid sometimes just gives up 10-15% of wins because it has a hand like this. Although this isn't a lost position. His hand, if you're going to get a clunky hand, this is about as good as it can be, with Fandral, Azure Drakes, both lending a possibility for card draws to get you out of it. And we've got a Druid of the Claw in this version as well, so that will help him slow the tide a little bit as well.
So Jason Joe was expecting a swipe here, which might explain why he was very cavalier with the placement and just threw it on the left. But once he saw the Violet Teacher, he got a bit confused, and this is going to lead to a little bit less damage for him. And on top of that, the Darolf Alpha positioning is very poor. You'd rather have the in-game boss on the left, so that when the imps come out, they get buffed by the Darolf Alpha. So Jason Joe, I don't know if that was being cavalier or if he had some hidden reason behind putting the Darkshire Councilman to the left, but it's getting a bit punished here regardless.
Now, going back to my statement, I think Jason Joe learned his positioning in the West. So going back to my statement earlier, that I think the Chinese players' positioning is better. Before I get accused of caster curses. Okay, so Zhongbo's got to find a way to slow this down. And the obvious initial thought is to just play a 4-6 taunt. But does that actually do it? He knows that any buff like Abusive Sergeant, Dark Iron Dwarf onto the Councilman just gets straight through it.
Right. The issue here is that a lot of times you can charge and get rid of the problem minion here to mitigate that issue, but there's no real problem minion. They're all problem minions, right? If you charge into Darolf Alpha, you're giving the In-King boss a decent trade, and then on top of that, the Darkshire Councilman's becoming an even bigger problem. So, no matter what you do here, you're kind of just eating it. And yeah, Jason Joe finds the good trade anyway, and this is what the game looks like when Druid draws poorly. And Zoo typically draws very well regardless, and that's just probably going to be game here.
Yeah, very much looking like it's going to be 1-1, and the Druid's letting both players down, so it seems pretty fair. Curve deck versus Druid. Druid draws
Oh,
badly for both players, and we're going to probably go into a best of 5, but he's finding some
living room top to top is some life here for Zhangbo. So
breathing room at least, although he didn't get to do that with the fan draw. Oh, and Jason Joe will probably hold on to this Crazed Alchemist, knowing that one of the only ways he loses here is to Ancient of War.
yeah, just gonna go ahead and play out the all this kind of stuff on the left side. Picks up the Stone Tusk Boar here, which is a bit more damage. And just looking at the damage he has on board, currently has 10, so he has 12 damage right now, which I wouldn't be as opposed to him going for. Just play that out right now, why not? Oh, he's going to trade, okay. Jason has shown an inclination to trade quite a few times this match. Over the course of the tournament. Sorry.
So over the time that I've been casting and discussing plays with pro players and stuff, the time that it comes the most arguments of anything is when you've got 99.5% win. That's when people start disagreeing on exactly what to do differently. Like, what do I play around exactly? How do I lose this game exactly? That's when decisions become awkward for the pro players.
Right. Jason Joe pretty much knows there's no innervate, and the only way he dies here is if there's like swipe off the top plus somehow Wrath was in hand. And yeah, I suppose it makes sense here for him to go for that, but it was very unlikely for him to lose regardless. And this is going to be that's definitely going to be a win.
How much would you like to lose this game, sir? And yeah, 1 game all in this highly important final. The winner will be going to the top 16 of the World Championship later in the year.
All right, well,
alongside Breath, who played really well in his qualifier 2 or 3 months ago. So there'll be the second representative for China. China at the moment 1 stage behind the EU and the West in that regard.
All right, so the Warlock is down here or cleared, I should say, for Jason Joe. I would say that's less important than the Shaman getting out of the way. Sometimes Shaman can run into problems, particularly against the other Zoo.
Mm-hmm.
And Zoo, yeah, it's lost to Druid so far in this tournament, but typically it manages to find a win. It's not going to be the reason why you lost the series, or at least it's very unlikely to be the case.
Right.
And part of the reason why is because the Warriors have been banned, right? And so getting the Zoo out of the way is not as important, so I still kind of want to give a slight advantage here to Zhangbo.
Yeah, just an absolute shade of an advantage to Zhangbo, I think. Just the tiniest thing. I do definitely agree that it's worth something. As you say, the Shaman deck's not... People overrate the Shaman deck slightly because it's so brutal when it wins. It's like, how could I stop it? Well, you couldn't. But another time, it's like, how could I lose to that? And it's like, well, you couldn't. So the Shaman sort of dictates the pace, so it feels like it's really powerful as it cues into the interesting Zhangbo-esque tempo mage.
Not sure if it's that Zhangbo-esque. It's just kind of China tempo mage right now. By the way, just in case people get mad or what have you. Yes, Jason Joe could have had lethal on the prior turn had he gone for the Dark Peddler first rather than going for the Dark Shark Councilman to get the buff on it, because he could have gotten the Boar. And also could have used the Crazed Alchemist onto the Imp boss. But that was a very rare situation where that could have been the case. Typically, you feel like if you get the 4 damage off from something like a Soulfire or the Power Vomit, you don't think about Stone Tusk Boar into being able to get that extra 2 damage for the win anyway. But that all aside, getting into this game here, pretty fast start here from both sides.
Right, and I think that favours the mage as long as he doesn't die to the 7/7. Which, it's fairly obvious. If you don't die to a 7/7, it helps a lot. But the mage having a really good opener means that it's not taking damage, which means it's setting up its mid-game, which means that its fireballs and stuff become far more powerful and easy to use.
Yeah, I find out the mage has a tough time dealing with multiple minions from the shaman, though. Things like Feral Spirit and things like, the Tuskar Totemic. You have to use single target removal on those things, and there are just several of them, and so that makes it very difficult for the mage. Typically we see the mage actually run out of cards. Either they have too many cards and they can't use them all, or they run out of cards dealing with the stuff on board.
Right, having the apprentice will help with that, and having that Kabbalist Tome may help if the apprentice can survive. So he can apprentice Coin Torch, but then that gives up his Kabbalist Tome for next turn. He can also just arcane intellect and then take an absolute beating. I think that loses if you do that. So this play's kind of forced.
Yeah, I think he was going to either torch or use the apprentice. I don't think there was any world in which he didn't torch, but he was just deciding whether he wanted to apprentice or not. And this is very smart because Jason Joe really wants to play this 4-mana 7/7, wants to get that meme right out there on the field. But it gets frustrating when you have to deal with that Sorcerer Apprentice on the board.
Okay, and now the Kabbalist Tome is interesting, so is the Arcane Intellect. Probably play the Intellect because he has cards in his deck that can just taunt up, protect her, do other things. But the Kabbalist Tome is a better use of his mana, possibly, and he can still draw those cards and play them for 0.
Right.
Going with the Intellect.
He needs the kind of the temple right here, and he finds something. He probably wanted to see the Arcane Blast, which he could have used to take out the Flaming Faces right now. But this is reasonable for him. Take out the Ardent Squire and put up a reasonable board on there.
Oh, and that's a kind of awkward draw. But not catastrophic or anything, because he does have at least a card for next turn.
Wow.
But he'd been hoping for something. And that
is fantastic.
Yeah.
I have to criticize his play a little bit here because I feel like the bigger threat on that board was the Sorcerer's Apprentice. I suppose with the Arcane Blast, it could have been something that dealt with the Flaming Faces, but you knew he didn't have it, right? And by the way, Fireball off the top, that's a big deal. Let's just throw that out there. but yeah, I feel like Jason Joe picked the wrong target, got rewarded in the end, and even rewarded even more so with this Manatide Totem here.
Okay, so the game plan here is reasonably obvious for Zhongbo. It's don't die and then play Yogg. But that's a long, long way in the future and looking like he probably won't get there. But maybe he just hangs on in there. Maybe he doesn't. just maybe he doesn't.
Yeah, this is the biggest issue, by the way. This was mentioning before. This Tuskar Totemic is the biggest problem for the mage in this matchup because 3 out of 7 times it makes a minion that you need to kill, but you also have to deal with the 3/2. And unless you have board, which you typically don't, you're just throwing one spell at it and you're dealing with one side, and all of a sudden the shaman is just killing you.
Yeah, your life total is a permanent issue in this game. The second you drift below 12, 13, something like that, you're just in a world of trouble, whatever you do. And that number is rapidly approaching as this all goes to face. He may choose to trade, but I don't see why he would. I think he would just stick it all in the face here.
Right. This isn't, strangely enough, because you wouldn't think of Druid as being more threatening with spells. This isn't Druid, so there's no like swipe craziness like that. Flame Strike already kills the board. Arcane Blast is already problematic, so you don't really care about it too much. Arcane Missiles can be an issue if one more hits where it needs to go, but still, it's not something you really.
And with no taunt, this is just going to be game anyway, with the Lava Burst and the weapon next turn.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if you just find a way to deal with all the minions. So that's going to be 2-1 to Jason Joe. Certainly, I think.
He can Ice Block, but
sure.
Most of the time you're delaying the inevitable, obviously.
So can he Ice Block and stay above 1?
He can stay above 2. He can stay at 2, essentially.
Yeah. Which isn't enough because Doomhammer. I guess, sure, he's alive. Why not try it? Maybe he could battle his tome into Ice Block, Ice Block, Ice Block.
He's kind of alive. Yeah, just turn this into a Tavern Brawl, right? No big deal. But yeah,
just all Kabbalist's tomes fetch 3 of a kind.
Yeah, and then you just Yogg into the win. This is no big deal. But yeah, he's still technically alive. He can Kabbalist Tome into another Ice Block. There's no more Ice Block in the deck, by the way. You don't run 2. So we'll see if he can pull off the impossible.
He can also there is no direct damage in hand either, so he can actually play the taunts for now, at least in the short term.
No Ice Block, no Ice Barrier either, which would have helped him. At least we can see on board. And yep, gonna give it up, and that's gonna be 2-1 to Jason Joe. Gonna play with his fan a bit more and see if he can't fan his way to victory.
Fan his way to victory. He's not playing Rogue.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe that was inappropriate. No Rogue. Damn, not relevant enough.
Ruined the punchline for you. I'm sorry. Stole it from you.
Alright, so Shaman out of the way. So everything I said about, everything I talked about before that game has now been reversed, since Shaman is now out of the way for Jason Joe. Only the Paladin and the Druid left, and I am anxiously waiting this Paladin to get out here, because again, Unstoppable force versus immovable object. 6-0 with his paladin is Jason Joe, and 6-0 against paladin, at least as of today and yesterday for Jongbo.
And if he's going to go to BlizzCon, he's going to have to find another win with it, one way or another.
Yeah, for both sides, right? Jongbo has to
Right.
beat the paladin, or Jason Joe has to win with the paladin, one way or another. That's going to be their path to victory.
The streak going to break one way or the other.
And we're gonna have to wait. We're gonna have to wait. We're gonna have another matchup between Zoo and Druid, and this time Jason Joe has the ramp.
Right, and this is where you start to see the difference. Not only has he got the ramp, but he's got the Maya Keeper. He's got actually
Triple
possibly
ramp.
slightly too much ramp, but that feels like it's bad. And then you draw Nourish or you draw Azure Drake or something like that happens, and then you realise just how good the ramp is, even on a very, very close to empty hand.
Right, as long as we don't have the Nightmare from last series. Yeah, and there we go. Nourish by itself is enough. He already has 3 pieces of ramp here, and he'll be well on his way to being ahead in this game, as long as things go normally. And Jongbo, by the way, has the standard. We saw the same exact hand, or a very similar one, from Jason Joe when he completely stomped all over Jongbo in this matchup earlier on. But, with the ramp, it changes everything.
Right, because now this Maya Keeper suddenly is a 3/3 for 2, or at least on turn 2, which makes it a functioning actual minion that has also managed to ramp you up for the rest of the game, as opposed to it being, a 3/3 for 4, which does nothing because your opponent's got a whole horde of minions. So the difference is just so stark just by that one Innovate being in hand at the start.
The funny thing is, for Jason Joe, he has a second Mire Keeper in hand, and we had a spirited discussion earlier on in chat about whether or not you go for the 2/2 when you innervate out the Mire Keeper. But for Jason Joe, I wouldn't be surprised to see him go for double ramp here and ramp with the second Mire Keeper. And I would like to say just to stick it to chat, but obviously he's not aware of that.
just contact him quickly. I know you're playing for BizCam, but our chat needs this to happen. So, yep, just going really well for him here. Though he's going to be either 3/3's even going to get work done.
Okay, he does go for the 2/2. Realizes that he might need to have that to deal with the Darkshire Consummate. So, score.
And he does have Wild Growth in hand, and he has already ramped, and he's got Nourish at a push as well. So, putting things on board in this situation where he's already got the ramp in force is probably fine.
Right. Well, in this situation, he is going to be able to deal with the Darkshire Council, and he's going to have to throw away his 3/1 to deal with it. But ends up working out. None, right? Just kidding. He draws 5 off the top.
Yep, that makes things a lot easier. Obviously, now nothing even dies on his side, and he'll probably keep the coin back just because he has Violet Teacher in hand.
Right.
Obviously, he's thinking about coining out the Wild Growth just to get it sorted out, but he's got the Violet Teacher. I don't see why he wouldn't just wait here.
If he coins out Wild Growth, he has 7 mana next turn. He can Nourish and then Hero Power, which I don't think is very much of a priority.
Yeah.
And that's going to be tap into the Imp King boss, which is a reasonable minion to throw down, but you haven't really done enough here if you are Jongbo.
Right. And Jason Joe just going to have to... Drawing the Yogg makes you have to rethink just to make sure your strategy is correct. Like, do I need to play for this Yogg, or do I just ignore the fact I've got Yogg, put it at the back of my mind as a backup option, and just carry on playing what I'm doing? You just need to reality check when you draw a Yogg that now you do have other options potentially. But he'll assess that he's in front, so he's not even going to worry about that for now.
Jason Joe decides not to deal with an Imp King boss, which activates, for lack of a better term, this Sea Giant. He can actually play everything in his hand as well as the Sea Giant. In fact, he could... Can he? Okay, hold on. If he hits a minion with his Imp King boss, it goes on to 4, which means he can actually tap, play all 3 1-drops and the Sea Giant if he runs the Imp King boss into something.
Okay.
If he decides to do that. Obviously, he'd be just throwing down the Abuse Sergeant for no real reason. He might want to hold on to that card. He can't actually deal with the Battle Teacher right now anyway. But yeah, he can tap and play literally everything in his hand.
That sounds like a strong Hearthstone turn, but he needs to do other things as well. Things need to die here. Or do they? Perhaps they don't. Might well come down to this Nourish.
Right, he could have tapped here. I don't know. Okay, so there's 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't. You're very rarely die to Druid in this situation.
Could he have tapped?
Yeah, he could have tapped because he look he has one extra mana, but he hit with the in-game boss after he played the Sea Giant.
Right, but the one thing dies and one thing gets made, right? So it's still the same unless you run
Oh,
into
right. You're right. So,
yeah, you have to run into the Violet teacher for that to work, I think.
right. Well, okay, fine.
That's
Well,
fine.
right. Well,
We'll proceed.
I was wrong and I was right, but we'll say I was wrong. That's perfectly fine with me. And for Jason Joe here, picked up the swipe, which is very important in this situation. Now he can take out this Sea Giant, but not going to worry about it. 27 health is a good place to be.
Right, and for once, Jongbo asked the question, do you have it? And the opponent goes, yep, I got it.
Got it right here, right off the nourish. No big deal. And the decision to keep that.
But as always, Jongbo was correct at the time. Like, the opponent didn't have it. He had to draw into it, and that's going to happen sometimes. And now Jongbo's looking at a very forlorn state here.
Defender Vargas off the top will be pretty nice here for Jongbo, but just going to give it up. Not even going to play it out any longer.
Interesting.
That game wasn't completely over, but it was kind of completely over. The thing is, Jongbo could have maybe thought that there was nothing in the hand of Jason Joe. That was very hard to have happen because he's already played all of his ramp anyway. But yeah, that game was never. The Sea Giant had to start trading, and there was going to be Yogg eventually. So that game was pretty much over.
Jongbo 6-0 against N'Zoth Paladin in this tournament. If he goes 9-0, he goes to BlizzCon.
Can he go 9-0
against a deck that is inconsistent?
But a deck that's been consistent
in both ways. Inconsistent doesn't mean bad. Inconsistent means inconsistent. It can be good. It can be bad. It can do anything.
It's been consistent enough for Jason Joe here.
It sure has. And his mulligan decisions were interesting previously. So, maybe he's got a really good handle on the deck. Or maybe it's just consistency for him. That's a Harvest Golem. That makes sense to add consistency, in fairness.
Yeah, that's something you can get out on 3. Typically, Paladin doesn't really have a turn on play on 3, so it certainly makes sense to go ahead and do that. Jongbo feels like his best matchup against this Paladin is going to be his Tempo Mage. And
unless he wants to get what he thinks is the hardest one out of the way.
That is true. Well, Zoo is reasonable. Druid is kind of the same thing. The thing is,
they're all kind of reasonable.
Right. It just kind of feels like not the greatest here. This is a path back for Jongbo, though. He doesn't have any horrible matchups. It's kind of just feels like going against. It kind of feels like going against the old priest. I've been comparing the N'Zoth Paladin to pre-standard priest, in that it's just very polarized, and it's good against certain matchups. But in this particular case, it's just kind of reasonable against all of them.
Yeah, I mean, one good draw, and this might be it, to be honest. He's got a good draw here, and Jason's in a really, really good spot. Obviously, he's in a good spot anyway by being 3-1 ahead and just needing it to work once. But, this is the draw he'd be looking for here.
Absolutely. For Jongbo, even if he gets on the board, there's going to be Doomsayers being really annoying. And if Jason Joe ever wants it to be that way, he can go for a double Doomsayer just to make sure that he maintains an advantage.
Well, and Jongbo needs to think right now for all of this 70 seconds what he's going to do with these 2 Flame Wakers. When does he want to go for the massive combo turn? What does he want to do in the meantime and such like? I think we may just see him sort of chilling here, bump into the 1-1 with his minion, maybe play the control role for a turn or 2, and then just go crazy with the Flame Wakers on sort of turn 7 or 8.
In the meantime, though, this Harvest Golem is really annoying. And even if he bumps into the 1-1, it's kind of not something he wants to do. But, yeah. He's going to go ahead and just take out this while he can. Take out the 1-1, just make things annoying for his opponent. And Jason Joe is going to play an Infested Tauren on curve, which feels good when your opponent has nothing on board.
I guess.
Well, this is
I've
the
never
best.
tried it.
If there's anything ever, if there's anything ever on board, it just dies completely. It trades absolutely horribly. But when you can just get it on the board right now, something Jongbo sitting here, he doesn't have to kill this, but it's pretty annoying.
And with that double Flame Waker, he really doesn't want to use that coin because it's so much damage. Not just the coin, but the stuff you play with the coin. But he may be thinking that he has to do something here in terms of getting out the Azure Drake, maybe.
He could just ignore it, to be completely honest.
He could just pass turn and ping face or ping the Tauren, depending how he sees that.
Maybe Frostbolt ping the slime.
Yeah. So that's where he's going to go.
Oh,
The only problem with the Frostbolt play is that
he's committing the Arcane Blasts. I don't know if he needed to do this. Because he has double Flame Waker and an Azure Drake in hand. And those things go really well with Arcane
yeah, it's an
Blast.
interesting play. It feels like maybe I don't know. That just feels like he didn't need to clear the board at that time, but
Well, if he was
obviously he's making space for these spells for one thing, but he's still got another card space. So
if he was committed to using the Kabbalist Tome, then it certainly makes sense to clear that off right now because he doesn't want to be taking so much damage, even if it is Paladin. And speaking of, the Kabbalist Tome gets the Spellbender, Ice Lance, and Pyroblast, and the Ice Lance only has one Frostbolt left in the deck to combine with.
well, the Ice Lance is good at stopping things like Sylvanas from attacking at some point. Not necessarily now, but if he wants to have a turn where he puts a load of stuff on the board and then just freeze Sylvanas, it's an option. Oh my goodness!
Arcane Intellect into Drake and Kabbalist Tome. Not going to be any issue for having cards here for Jongbo, but he's taking damage in the meantime. And who is the control here? I thought that the Paladin was going to be on the back foot.
Right, and Jason Joe kind of showing why he's done well with this. Apart from that, he's drawn well. He is just going at it. He's decided, I've got this hand that I can turn into an aggro hand. Let's go for it. Let's not hold back on Sylvanas and try and be cute. Let's just hit our opponent for 10 a turn until he dies from it. Seems like a good way to win games.
Yeah, and the thing about Sylvanas is it either gets fireballed and your opponent's not doing much that turn, or your opponent goes off with the Flamewaker nonsense. And typically, if you put anything else on the board, the Flamewaker nonsense comes out. Whereas right now, Jumbo can't really afford to do that. Goes for the Drake, which means he has 10 cards in hand. Needs to get rid of something.
Yeah, I'd be really tempted just to Ice Lance Sylvanas here and try and establish some sort of board.
Yeah, certainly.
Just to keep her under control for a turn and make the trades happen into your Drake maybe, and so on. You haven't got to, but it's looking like playing card from hand would be good.
Wow, he's gonna purposely overdraw because he feels like every card in his hand he needs. Doesn't have Yogg yet though, which is certainly problematic here, and we're gonna see what he overdraws right now.
And he's chosen to do this. You don't think about a turn that long and then overlook you've got 10 cards.
Okay, that's one of the better cards to overdraw. It's very innocuous. Yes, it's spell damage, but it's really not that big of a deal right now compared to what else he could have overdrawn, particularly Yogg.
Right, yeah, that would have been absolutely terrible. Although he's going to die very soon if he doesn't find an answer.
Right, to a Paladin.
He needs that coin. He's keeping the coin because a Pyroblast for Sylvanas is his only way of dealing with her right now, maybe?
I highly doubt that's what he's trying to go
for. I'm surprised he's keeping this coin, put it that way.
Right. I think he needs to just go off right now. Double Flame Waker.
I think you're right. I think he just needs to play everything.
Double Flame Waker, Mana Worm, Coin Torcer, Apprentice, Missiles.
And then whatever you can cast, right.
Yeah.
And you need to Ice Lance Sylvanas and try and ping everything else.
He made a slight mistake.
Don't hit Sylvanas.
His Mana Worm could have been a bit bigger here, unless he didn't want to get stolen by Sylvanas, but kind of interesting. Yeah. He could have made the Mana Worm a bit bigger.
And here we go. All the pings are going pretty well for him so far, to be fair.
He could actually Ice Lance the face if he wanted to. Especially
I think the way these pings have gone, you just Ice Lance Sylvanas now because you're going to clear a lot of the time here. Yep.
Well, clears pretty perfectly.
Yeah, and it only hit Sylvanas 3 times and hit the rest of the minions all of the other times, which is spectacularly good considering where he was at.
Jason Joe can clear the board in a really masochistic way by going for double Pyromancer Consecration. That doesn't feel the greatest, though, obviously.
He can also... Actually, that's not that terrible, is it? But yeah, it is, because you know you're losing if you do that, to be fair.
Yeah, everything goes away. He might just go... Oh, he is going to go for it. Okay, sure. Just going to leave his True Silver up here.
And now Drake into Kabbalist Tome, and suddenly Jongbo is going to have some sort of chance, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Way more than a chance. Jason Joe needs to pick up something right now because Jumbo is going to reload in a hurry. We'll see what he picks up off the top here just to get him going. And that is an Arcane Intellect for even more draw.
So which ones do you go with here?
I think he wants to get something on the board here to start pushing damage to the face. Maybe
so you play the Drake and hope to draw a 4-drop?
Well, you play a Drake and
a 3-drop, yeah.
Worst case scenario, you just play the Arcane Intellect. but at least you have something on the board. And wow, it picks up a Yogg. Not too bad. And even gets a Mana Worm for his trouble. And Jason Joe has seen at least one True Silver. And there might not be a way to deal with this.
This is absolutely awful hand for Jason Joe right now.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's got some time to make it less awful, draw Solemn Vigil into some stuff. But, you know, there's not a lot going for him now.
Jason Joe had a very fast opening hand to be able to deal with any sort of aggro opening, but there was no aggro on the side of Jongbo, so really amounted to nothing here.
Do you Pyroblast Face here and just ask the question again? Just to get it out of your hand. It's 10 mana. This turn's going to be a bit of a write-off anyway. Do you just Pyroblast Face or do you Cabalist's Tome? Okay, you Cabalist's Tome. This is fine by me.
Yeah, he can just take his time and see what he has going for him. Ping the face, go for this Roaring Torch, excuse me. And that's a lot of damage.
And this is where having something on the board would have been good, because when you force your opponent to heal, if you've got the instant hits straight back from the board, then obviously that's really good. But
by the way, Jason Joe knew that wasn't the counterspell from before, and also, if you're unaware, Spellbender only goes off if you target a minion, which makes it a pretty weak spell in my opinion, but yeah, just able to heal himself with no worries about that being countered in any way. And there's a Rag Lightlord. It's absolutely huge for him. That was exactly what he needed here. Better than really any other card in his deck, other than maybe Lay on Hands.
And each point of damage he's putting into Zhongbo here is making that Yogg less and less comfortable. And you know, if it inevitably even gets played. Zhongbo is doing everything he can to win without playing it, but at some point he may well have to play that card.
All right, Zhongbo trying to figure out how to deal with this. He probably has to polymorph that, as he was pointing out in the first place. But the issue right now is that Jason Joe is already at 27, right? So if he picks up any sort of bomb off the top at any point, even something like Nazal, just to get the Infested Tauren and the Harvest Golem out there, suddenly...
And his deck is full of bombs, right? He's got Tyrion, N'Zoth, he's got Cairn. There'll be other bits and pieces around as well. He hasn't drawn much stuff. There'll be more healing. There might be a Lay on Hands.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, Jason Joe, that the reason he needs to deal with all of this and start killing his opponent as fast as possible, because, again, he's at 9 health from that very far start from Jason Joe when, you know, Zhongbo was sitting back. But this certainly looks like a setup for Yogg, and Jason Joe is going to kind of play into it by having a board here.
Here we go. I think he has to do it now.
Yeah, I don't think Blizzard is a
Unless
play.
he draws something nuts, like another 4-mana Blizzard. Card that doesn't exist.
Well, there's Ice Block. Wow, he actually does pick up Ice Block. And by the way, that's Spellbender. That's not Ice Block in hand. Or on board, I should say. So he's going to go for it. He's played 17 spells. Jason Joe's going to sit back and just kind of enjoy the action here. No damage spells quite yet. Nothing even happening. Curse of From is damage. To be fair. Power of the Wild. Okay, sure. Resurrect, a Mana Worm, not a big deal. Okay, he gets rid of one minion here with the End of the Colosseum. Corruption is very good, but he might die if there's any damage on the opponent's side. Battle Rage picks up one card. Quick Shot, that's very dangerous. Goes to the opponent's face. Multi-shot doesn't hit anything. Gets a spell, don't know what that is. Bash is healing. That's very nice for him. Bolster, nothing. Ambush, wow, that is huge. Jason Joe's already used a lot of stuff already. Mulch, which minion doesn't go on? Goes on the Yogg, of course it does. Gives his opponent a Bloodsail Corsair. Circle of Healing does nothing. And there's a Cursor from going off. So overall, a decent Yogg considering he just needed to stay alive. And there's the Ambush, the Druvian coming up. Wow. Praise Yogg, everyone.
It was a good Yogg, but considering how many spells he'd fed it, it didn't work out as brilliantly as it could have.
Ice Barrier.
He'd appeal for an animal companion or just for a way to get rid of this lethal, but he's in a good spot.
Ice Barrier, by the way.
Oh, that's massive. Okay, that makes it a lot better. Because that's healed for 11 instead of 3 now. That's absolutely gigantic.
Either Ice Barrier or Effigy, I think, would have been the best there. And just going to trade in first, just because otherwise... Unless you want to get the 3 damage to face, which is somewhat inconsequential unless you pick up True Silver off the top.
And all players are so stubborn, even amazing ones like Jason Joe. It's like, I don't want to have to worry about this 2 damage nonsense, but I've got to.
So Jason Joe And by the way, here's Spellbunner coming out. That's an extra 1/3 on the board, which doesn't get humiliated at all. Jason Joe figured that there were a lot of 4-drops in this deck, and he was right to assume that, but he picked up the 1 4-drop that he thinks would have given the ability to pop the Ice Block, if he thinks that's Ice Block. But he actually could have won the game if that wasn't Ice Barrier and he had gone face.
Right. And now he's going to get the bad news that Ice Block's actually coming in a minute.
Or he's dead.
Or death coming in a minute first.
Wow.
So spell damage, yeah?
Oh my goodness. I can't believe the way that game went. Jason Joe had every opportunity to be able to deal with an early aggressive start from Jongbo, but Jongbo just didn't do anything for the longest time, then went off as much as he could, and Yogg in the end was able to push through for the victory.
Yeah, and that was spectacular. And the Yogg wasn't particularly unfair as Yogg's go there. There's a lot of spells cast, a lot of them did nothing. It won in the game, but it's a 10-mana card. 10-mana cards are allowed to win you games. But it wasn't sort of ridiculous. It just gave him a bit of armor and killed 1 minion, basically. And that was and drew a card, which was really important as well because it got him to that extra card at the end. Wow.
Yeah,
that was close.
I am absolutely speechless after that one. All right, we're going to see some more nonsense. We could see some more Yogg as well with the Druid coming up, but now it's going to be...
Jason Joe's first loss with that Paladin deck in this event.
Yeah, we're mentioning it before. 6-0 for Jongbo against the Paladin, and Jason Joe 6-0 with the Paladin. That's his first loss. And we were mentioning Jongbo needs to go 9-0 or else he is out and he won't be qualifying for BlizzCon. Meanwhile, this is still match point for Jason Joe. Just needs to win this or the next match to qualify.
Right, and this is a good hand for both players, so we might get the answer which of these two decks is actually better head-to-head. I fancy the Zoo could take this.
Yeah, the issue with the clear that Jason Joe has is that it's not power equality, right? It's a quality consecration, which costs 6 mana. Which is problematic against Zoo, which can get a very fast start.
And your true silver champion is not a war axe. It does not kill things quickly. So the life gain isn't really relevant against Zoo. What you're worried about against Zoo is just the overwhelming flow of stuff coming your way. And true silver just picks away at it a little bit slowly. And the Zoo minions are bigger than they feel. Like when they're not tiny, they're actually kind of chunky.
When they're not tiny, they're chunky. Absolutely.
So Consecration kind of overkills half the deck and doesn't kill the other half.
Yeah, either the 1/1s or they're 2/4s that spawn.
Yeah, or they come back to life, or they've got Divine Shield, or just things that you don't need. So, going to be interesting to see. This tournament will be a speed bump at some point, but yeah, Jongbo just doing Jongbo things and going as all in as he dares.
Yeah, he had a kind of a half okay trade and a half annoying trade with the Harvest Golem. Decides, you know what, these things are annoying. Let's just go face here.
It's great how he does that, and yeah, he does it correctly time and time again. And yeah, Jason Joe's got a very, very
tough,
difficult series of turns here.
Right, this is very difficult for him right now. Does he go for the true silver? He does end up going with that. It was a reasonable consecration, but he only has 2 in hand. And even though you do have 2 in hand, once you use the first one, the second one tends to go pretty quickly because you're falling behind since you haven't developed anything.
Yeah, and he may be looking at just equalitying next turn and hoping that nothing big comes down so he can consecration the turn after. Like just equality, bump into the councilman to get rid of that threat, and then the turn after, consecration to clear up things, see what's left, and hope he's drawn some good cards.
All right, so
that's the bad news for him.
Yeah, Jason Joe, or excuse me, John Wood is going to go ahead and play out this Dark Iron Dwarf. This is pretty annoying for Jason Joe to deal with, and the math doesn't really work out well for a single consecration, like we were mentioning. That is pretty reasonable, though. The mana doesn't work out too well, but he could just go for equality right now, like you were just mentioning.
Yeah, and then he can actually... So he can equality, kill off the councilman and Doomsayer. It won't go off, but it will save him 7 life.
Well, he's going to go for this instead, just kind of clear out the board with a single consecration. Saves the quality consecration in his back pocket. And yeah, for the future, he has... Next turn is probably going to be looking like Infested Tauren plus Doomsayer, which is difficult to get rid of.
That. Yeah.
And then he has, again, this the quality consecration in his back pocket, and he has a few draws able to draw into something to do at least for the next few turns.
Well, getting to Light Lord, pretty spectacular for him as well if he gets that far. And this is looking possible for him now.
Jason Joe picks up this Rattling Blade, which can help him a bit, but yeah, the Torn is a bit more as far as just getting in the way. The Rattling Blade only takes off 1 damage, whereas the Torn takes off 3. Obviously, there's buffs to keep in mind. And looking at Jongbo's hand, can he deal with this? He can.
This is where Doomsayer is so annoying, because you want to play your Direwolf and like chain kill with your 1/1s, and you can't because it doesn't kill any of them for you.
Yeah.
Like if he was a 1/7, he'd be easy as a kill, ironically.
He does have the ability to kill it looks like, so yeah, exactly, it looks like. So this ends up working out pretty well for him, except for the fact that there's a Consecration is on his hand.
Yeah, Consecration clears this lot up, and then whatever Jongbo does can be answered by Light Lord, and that's just on the surface. There's also this Sylvanas, there's the weapon, there's plenty of options here for Jason to work with, and he must be starting to fancy his chances that he's going to go to BlizzCon now.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's not over yet. He's on 16, he's facing a 5/7 in the face.
Yeah, Jason Joe is committing to killing off this, or throwing away the slime, though. Wow.
It's a juggler, right?
Wow, Knife Juggler into Forbidden Ritual is the super punish in this situation. There is the Light Lord here to be able to heal him back up, but oh my goodness. 2 Consecrations down and a board filled right up again for Zoo.
So after the Light Lord comes down, Jongbo's going to have a decision to make of how many things he wants to hit the Light Lord with. Is he going to want to kill it, or does he just hit it once and go all face with the rest to try and stop it healing itself, or to stop it healing the face? He'll probably just take it down, but then he's going to be very low on resources and rely on his life tap, which is absolutely fine.
Wow, Sea Giant off the top.
But
Okay.
you can't do Sea Giant stuff with the Doom Guard. Doesn't work like that.
But you're right, but the Sea Giant on the board is absolutely ridiculous, and this Rag Light Lord might have to just trade into it unless Jason Joe can pick up something off the top here. Can't imagine what that would be.
So he's deciding what to do with his last one. You know it's going to probably trade into the Sea Giant anyway?
You know what he could
but
do?
By bumping it in, you force it.
You know what he could do? Speaking of Jason Joe, he could run his Light Lord into the Flame Imp. He can equality, brings his Light Lord back to 1, which means it's at full health, and then he can smack his own face into the Sea Giant, kill off the Sea Giant, and he'll ride back up to with 8. And maintain his board, kind of. And also play a Kodo and a dude.
That's a play he could make.
The thing is, if he takes less damage that way, because if he runs his face into the Imp, then he takes 3 damage. If he runs his face into the Sea Giant, he takes 0 damage.
And the reason I think that Jongbo went with this run into the 8/8 here, by the way, is because of humility. Like, if there's a humility in hand and humility is a Sea Giant, then you haven't forced this Light Lord to do anything. But this kind of forces the Light Lord to trade into the Sea Giant and save the humility for another day, because you want to make sure it heals your own face or whatever.
Right.
So
Jason Joe goes for this play instead. It does save the equality, but we'll see if the equality does have any value in the meantime.
This is so close. This is the problem when you play 2 Soulfires, 2 Doom Guards.
Yeah.
This is going to happen. You can tap and take the 50-50.
It is not lethal anyway, though, because it's 12.
Sure, but it's good. This is fine, though. Now you tap, see where you're at.
Just get as much stuff on the board
And
as
you're
possible.
Okay.
Pyro is 11.1% off the top here. He can also draw Tyrion to get in the way.
Forbidden Healing.
Or Aldor. Aldor not too bad.
I'm not sure. I don't think it might. I mean, it is enough currently on board, but there's got to be so many outs here now.
I think he has to hit the face here just to heal as much as possible. And, 2 is a lot harder, or excuse me, 3 is a lot harder to do than 2 for Zoo. At least most of the time. But
Sure.
there are many outs in Jungle's deck. He runs a very aggressive variant. That is 2. And that might be 1.
Oh my goodness.
The thing is, there's 11 damage on board, so he needs to...
No, exactly. He set this up exactly. That's why he went face as well. So...
Uh-oh. Do you have a DC? Jason Joe, yeah, you see him, he has his palms raised up. He's like, there's a DC on my end. Can we not have a DC?
What?
Oh, God. Oh, no. Can we not DC in the finals?
At this exact moment when this decision is absolutely crucial.
The ping didn't go face. Now the admins are finally recognizing that something is wrong here. But the
What's
ping
the matter?
didn't
Well,
go.
the game's not working, but nothing important.
Yeah. The ping didn't go face because otherwise Jongbo wouldn't have made those trades that we saw him do. We saw the arrows go into the minions. And
Not like this.
I imagine he cleared some things. But
Wow.
most likely not the Sylvanas, obviously.
Well, you asked what happens
Oh,
when
we're
the
back.
unstoppable force hits the immovable object, and it breaks the server, apparently.
And I think that's just going to be game. I don't think he can get out of this one. Yeah, just concede here for Jason Joe. Doomsayer off the top is not going to help him. And we are going to go to a Game 7 here between these two players. It's all going to come down to this. Druid versus Paladin.
Druid versus Paladin. So one thing that happens in this matchup is... it's down to the Druid's draw, right? Like, if it's a slow draw, the Paladin will get time to establish board and sort itself out and play all its big stuff. And if Druid just does the ramp thing that it's meant to do, the Druid should take it down.
Well, in a way, right? Because if Paladin doesn't have anything to do either, then Druid just kind of gets to its spots without Paladin having dealt with anything in the first place. Obviously, if you can get Karen out at the same time that your opponent's getting things out, then it can be problematic. But one thing that the Paladin needs to do in this matchup is have a couple of board clears for the massive boards that the Druid has, available to it, right? It can go for a massive teacher board and go for a massive Fangel board, things like that. And you need to have the clears for them. And then after you are able to clear all that kind of stuff, then you can get your N'Zoth, all the kind of death rattles out, and the Druid cannot deal with it. So Jason Joe, you see him, he keeps the power equality, and that is exactly what you need to do in this matchup. He understands the way to win this.
And Zhongbo, as of yet, not got any relevant ramp in his hand. I mean, turn 4 is relevant a little bit, but that's we're after the wild growth, the innovates here. And he's just got a hand of big things that do nothing. Meanwhile, Jason Jones got a hand that looks like the Druid hand should, which is full of, early, useful minions and a second equality.
Second equality, normally you say that's a bad thing to pick up, but Jason Jones needed to pick that up at some point. So I think he's fine with this. He can play the Rotor later.
Gets through 2 Agents of Wars is good by me. So now you have to make the 3-2, I think.
Well,
no.
There is coin True Silver that can deal with that. I think Jongbo recognizes that this power route is crucial in order to establish a board. And
sometime later, yeah.
And by the way, Jason Joe, he decided to hero power now, realizing that there's no ramp, and now he plays the Loot Hoarder, because now this goes into the 4-drop from from Jongbo. And if he had picked up a Rattling Blade or a True Silver, he can actually deal with a Fangel or a Vile Teacher. So very nuanced play here from Jason Joe, but makes sense in hindsight.
Right, and he's thinking, my goodness, there is a Tyrion in my deck. Because he hasn't seen that much today at all. Just going to play sensibly and nothing too unusual about that turn. Yeah. Now we get into a place where Zhongbo can just curve through his big stuff. This is going to be the testing turns for Jason to deal with.
Yeah, you could have thrown the Loot Hoarder in and to see what he draws, but most likely it's just going to be a hero power afterward, which can be dealt with since there's 6 mana. You can just play a 4-drop and then use the hero power there. So Jason Joe goes for the more consistent play, which is to develop a board here with the Eldor. Obviously not the best target to put it on, but most of the things in the Druid, other than the Ancient of War, are mid-range minions. And once the Ancient of War comes down, maybe you have Keeper of Oldemon. You also have Equality if you're ever in a lot of trouble.
Right. So how he uses these 2 equalities will probably decide whether he has a chance or not in this match. It may just be that he doesn't have a chance due to Zhongbo's massive curve here, but he's got the tools to work with now, Jason, and he's going to have to play very, very, very carefully, or he could just find himself flooded by chunks of damage.
Jason Joe has a pretty difficult turn here once more. You can go for the Kodo or the Doomsayer or the Cairn right here. And he's thinking about throwing this Eldor in, and I actually would, because otherwise Cairn might not be able to do anything. If this is dealt with a Wrath, and Cairn just sits there and runs feudally into the Druid of the Claw, so yeah.
Yeah, 4-5 is not a good shape against Druid, oddly enough. 4-5 is a really good minion normally, but all the Druid guys are just out-health the 4. And so you're right there. That running that 3-3 in allowed the Cairn to at least kill something.
Ooh, wow. That's pretty huge here. Right off the top is the Eldor, and he's going to be able to Kodo that since there's not much else in the Druid lineup that is able to that has 2 or less attack.
Right, and that's enabled him to keep those 2 equalities that we were saying. How he uses those is going to be key. Well, if he doesn't have to use them for as long as possible, it makes it easier and easier for him to use them correctly. And he's going to be a really good spot here for me.
You might have to use the quality for this though, with the rag coming down, and that doesn't feel too good since he's already used Eldor.
Yeah, rag behaving itself, hitting a minion, probably going to cause the equality to happen. Jason now is
or just Sylvanas off the top, no big deal. Just play that.
Gonna have to just go for the Sylvanas play. What could go wrong? So 1 in 6 if nothing changes here for that to be steal the rag. But obviously, Jumbo has a good turn here to make sure that doesn't happen if possible.
Yeah, as many 1/1s as possible here. The problem is that this is the beauty of Sylvanas, right? It's kind of like Justicar in Warrior, because in Warrior, if you have the Justicar, you make your opponent commit to the brawl, or commit too much to the board, and then you can brawl. For the Sylvanas here, since the rag is so bad against the Sylvanas, and you need to put so many things on the board just so that the rag doesn't get stolen. Whatever happens here, Jason Joe has a very good power equality coming up.
Yeah, at the very least, and then other things could be even better than that. So. Like you say, he's forced this position by responding to the rag in this way with that drawn Sylvanas, and
takes a Val Teacher, and Jumbo is not very happy. Goes to face as well, and now there can be a pretty decent equality here. Is there any way to go about this? Any other way to go about this? The equality feels bad.
You're trying to make the equality so it makes tokens and you don't have to end up doing anything else.
Yeah, right? Now you actually have a board. So this suddenly feels not as good to use equality in the situation, but I still think it has to be done. You can bump your Bane into the Ancient of War, and then you can equality so that your Bane kind of stays alive against these 1/1s. Your Teacher goes into the rag, and then from there you can play Solemn Vigil. But no, I'm just going to play Tyrion. No fear. No need equality, just play Tyrion out on the board. And
the only problem with rag sometimes when you play against it like this, it's the first time it goes face, you're like, yeah, it's gone face. And then the second time it goes face, you're like, oh, okay, I've taken 16 damage from nowhere suddenly. And yeah, you need to make sure that you don't fall into the trap of thinking, yeah, sure, I can afford rag to keep going face. You can at the moment, but trying to be too greedy can sometimes just result in you taking 24 damage you weren't expecting. He has the healing, so he can afford to do it for now.
Wow. So this is actually pretty huge here for Jumbo, because Jason Joe, he made this greedy play because he wanted his opponent to overcommit to the board. And the only thing that's been committed here is this Power of the Wild.
That mulch is disgusting, by the way. Cthulhu does still do 6 shots.
It does do 6 shots, but it's only 6/6, so it's not the most ridiculous thing in the world. Finally, Power Equality is going to come out. He does have the second equality. No activator at the moment. You imagine he'll pick it up at some point, but for now, he does have the ability to kind of stall his opponent.
And there's N'Zoth, and he's played Sylvanas and Tyrion. Getting this Doomsayer down means that he's going to get first dibs at the board. He's going to be able to put that down, unless Jumbo decides to swipe and charge in a Druid of the Claw here, which he may do.
Right, but Jason Joe just kills it off. He goes on to 14, which, again, there's no combo anymore, so you don't have to worry about that nonsense. And he goes on to 14, puts a Tyrion back in the way, and a massive board for Druid to deal with, especially with no mulch available anymore. So no matter what,
it doesn't look great. Maybe Raven Idol, see what you pick it up and see if it's worth doing that, and you get another minion. But he'll probably go for spell. But
goes for the minion. Wow, he just wants to have as much pressure as possible. And he's just going to hero power and go to face here. And the spell doesn't really matter as much because the Yogg is already going to have enough fuel.
Sure.
But yeah, Jason Joe here is just going to throw down this N'Zoth, and it's going to feel really good for him. Even gets the Loot Holder and the Cairn out, as well as that Sylvanas and Tyrion, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and even the little things, like I say, like the Cthulhu and so on now, even if somehow all this gets cleared, Cthulhu for 6 will clear a board most of the time, especially with backup weapons and such like. And, the fact it's 10 mana is almost irrelevant. It's still a thing that does something fairly brutal.
Well, can John Bo live here?
And
Is John?
I don't even know if he can live. I'm assuming that Raven Idol means he can definitely live one way or another. But
Well, no. I mean, well, Raven Idol has to be like, I don't know, Deathwing. Even just let your opponent steal the 12/12 or something like that. I don't even know what you could possibly pick up. There's no Poison Seeds. You can Raven Idol into Raven Idol to your heart's content. You can Raven Idol into. He wishes he could Raven Idol to draw the Yogg.
yeah, I think the minion is better than spell here.
Guess
I don't think the spell gives you any outs. I think minion gives you a few.
Get some
Like
mulch.
short, yeah.
Mulch is okay. I guess you put it on the Sylvanas because Sylvanas is really annoying. You could put in the Tyrion, but he might just be dead right now anyway.
I think he might be dead after choosing to go for spell. I'm not sure he could live after that point.
15. That is exact lethal with good quality here. Unless he goes for hero power. Okay, he's going to go actually for the innovate hero power. So Jason Joe is 1 damage off lethal.
He just plays Cthulhu, right?
Oh, wait. No, that's the same
That's
amount.
22.
Oh, yeah, that is more damage.
Cthulhu
right?
kills the minion. Oh, it might not kill it exactly. He's got
Well,
to do.
well, you kill the Tyrion. You kill it with Tyrion. And then you have exactly enough damage to face here with the Cthulhu. The Cthulhu Mulch coming back to bite him. Sorry, 1 damage over. And Jason Joe, in 7 games, what an epic final here, is going to go to BlizzCon. He wins it over Jongbo. And this is exactly what we were saying earlier, that these are the 2 best players in China, arguably. And they lived up to it. Goes the full 7 games. He brings home the key.
And explodes. Wow, that was Jongbo's only out, was Jason Joe just exploding when picking up the key. And that's fantastic to see. That we got 2 of the very best players in that final. We got the Paladin matchups we wanted as well. We got to see 3 of those where both players have been either beating it or winning with it. And yeah, congratulations, Jason Joe. Be very excited to see how he gets on. Here's a guy who can genuinely win the event. He's good enough to do that. And it'd be great to see him at BlizzCon. Jongbo, I think we haven't seen the last of him. He could still end up there as well, I feel.
Yeah, definitely. And we actually had Tides in the chat earlier. Tides, someone who's played against Jason Joe a lot on the Americas server. People are very familiar with him on the Americas server, especially the top players. And like we mentioned, he played in the Americas prelims earlier in the year, went to China, played very well in the Hearthstone team story, has been doing well in Chinese tournaments. And certainly this is his crowning achievement thus far, winning the China Summer Championship, qualifying for BlizzCon. And like we've already mentioned, he's going to be a force to be reckoned with at that BlizzCon Championship. One person who can definitely win the entire thing. So China, I don't want to, say anything too bad about last year's crop of, entrants, but this year is definitely going to be a very strong crop, at least thus far. And China, more than any other season, apart from, Tiddler coming very close to winning it, more than any other season, China has a very good chance of winning BlizzCon this year.
Yeah, we've got Jason Joe, we've got Breath, who is definitely a powerful player within the Chinese scene, and 2 more still to come. And, there are at least a handful of players who are capable of winning BlizzCon, of being big favourites to have a good shot at BlizzCon. That's really badly worded, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I'm looking forward to further qualifiers. And to be fair, all 8 of the people who are going so far are powerful Hearthstone players. I'm looking forward to it a lot.
Well, while you were talking, Linda, Jason Joe actually had a message in English that I wasn't actually able to catch, but we were moving on past that point here. And just taking a look at the ceremony, going to blow us up for a moment here with our MC here. But yeah, very well played by Jason Joe. Very well played by Jongbo to bring that back. It looked like it was going to be over, as it looks like the ceremony is starting to wrap up here. But yeah, Jongbo, it looked like it was going to be over. 3-1. He was down, brought it back to 3-3, but unable to overcome the Paladin in the end. I guess when you have the unstoppable force against the immovable object, it goes 2-1. That's the answer?
Yeah, 2-1 in the end, I guess. After a crash server and an exploding man, yeah, it's all going on. And Jongbo there showing why we think he's one of the best players as well. Under pressure there, 3-1 down, managing to keep his cool, bring it back to the brink, and then, Jason Joe then showing why he's one of the best players and managing to also not crack under the pressure. Both guys had a lot of chances to crack up if they wanted to there, and they chose to play well instead.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Got the final we deserved, and I thoroughly enjoyed all of that.
Alright, just wrapping up here, watching this beautiful set of production things here. But there is your final result. Started off with Bingjun taking out Shu X. Then we had Jongbo taking out Yugi. EXO winning over Silence, Jason Joe defeating Sleeping. In our round of 4, we had Zhangbo defeating Bingxuan, Jason Joe defeating X-Hope. And incidentally, in our 3rd place match, we had X-Hope defeating Bingxuan. And finally, for all the marbles, E-Stars Jason Joe taking out Tongfu's Zhangbo. So you will be seeing Jason Joe at BlizzCon. He joins Breath as the 2nd Chinese qualifier from that region to go to BlizzCon here. And we have our first 8 qualifiers. Can you name them all? Lorinda, I'm going to put you on the spot right now.
Can I name them all? No.
I think I can.
I probably could if you give me time, but
okay, hold on. Let's just do this. Well, let's just do
okay.
this while
Tais, Dione, Nyman.
Why are you saying them out of order?
Oh, so what? You go in order. After you.
Okay, so in order from the first season on, so we have Amnesiac, right? And then we had Dahyoni from the APAC region. And then from EU we had Nyman. And then from China we had Breath. And then in the second season we had Sidonia. And we had Tice. And then we had Handsome Guy. And now we have Jason Joe. So you just go in order.
I'd have got there.
Yeah. You're saying it in this weird order, though. Anyway, thank you everyone for watching. We appreciate it. And I think I'm going to upload these to my YouTube channel. So go ahead and check that out if you missed part of the show here. And very exciting to see a very good player, again, coming from China. Very excited to see how he's going to perform at BlizzCon in just a few months here. And that's going to be it for us, guys. Thank you again for watching. Lorinda, anything you want to say before we head out?
No, not much. There's another round of qualifiers coming up on the main channel in 2 or 3 weeks' time. Check those out for the summer finals for like the other regions. And yeah, just stay in touch with this, and we'll see you all in the BlizzCon at some point as well. Looking forward to this now with all those players that D2 just named.
Awesome. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you guys later.